Good morning. Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. Sponsored by Fieldstone Memory Care, Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers innovative and compassionate care, and now they are accepting residents. So if you want to jot their phone number down, it is 360-689-4314. And they're also offering day, stay, and respite programs. So if you want to tour the facilities, give them a call today. I'd also like to acknowledge that the Senior Community Center is on the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water, and we honor them. And today, David Harrison checks in with us with his monthly review of national politics. David was the founder and executive director of the Northwest Policy Center at the University of Washington. As a senior lecturer, he taught policy analysis for many years at the university's Evans School. Good morning, David.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us today. What's up?
It's a pleasure. So as usual, we'll be done within our hour and we'll have three segments. The three segments today are where the Congress is going and the country's going on gun violence. Secondly, I want to talk about what Senate races we can win and how, and then I want to end up with a little note on ways that Donald Trump could be indicted by the end of the summer. So those are all good topics, and as usual, I'll stop between each of them so we can respond to questions, thoughts, and concerns. A lot of you are veterans of these same wars that I am, so hopefully I'll stimulate your thinking. I sometimes see people on the street who have listened to our recording, so we'll have to exchange high levels of wisdom with each other to warrant their further checking in on us. I want to have us all remember that how we do in November depends enormously on where we are on several issues in September. Right now, as you know, if we had an election today, we'd lose the House, and we don't want to do that. A lot of what we've been able to accomplish in the last year and a half has required us having this very narrow control over both the House and the Senate. So the issue will be where we stand in November on at least these issues. Did the Fed thread the needle? That is, are we putting the brakes on inflation while not throwing the country into any kind of serious recession? Related to that, in September, where have gas prices headed? They don't have to be back to $3.60 a gallon, but for us to do well in November, we would want them to have receded not insignificantly. And of course, the end of the big summer travel season is a help in that regard. How are we doing with the pandemic? Will Joe Biden be able to say, and his advisors be able to say, that we've reached a new point of stability with regard to the pandemic, and that they certainly had something to do with that? How's Ukraine doing? How is Zelensky doing? Are they holding on and moving towards some kind of resolution that underscores the enormous role Biden and the United States have played? What happened with Roe v. Wade? Has the Supreme Court decision been announced in September? Is it what we expect? And is the country sufficiently outraged, especially independent voters in swing states? And what did we do about gun safety? So a lot of how we do in November depends on the response to all our conditions in September on all those issues. And as you can see, there's a lot of unknowns out there. There's a possibility that a number of those things will advantage us politically in November. And as you know, that's because on a lot of these issues, the Americans are not at all evenly split. They're not split on gun safety. They support our position on Roe v. Wade and on gun safety and on climate change. So that helps when you have elections, especially in swing states. The big issue, of course, has been whether we can get our voters out in an off-year election like we did in 2018 monumentally. And the good news about the bad news is Roe v. Wade will help us do that. Again, especially in swing states. Those are the same states that will be fighting over state regulations. And those are the same states, and for the most part, where we have close Senate races. So it's a plus for us. And it's not, you hear commentators saying, well, it cuts both ways, should have an even impact on both sides. That's baloney. When you have 70% of Americans feeling something, and it becomes an especially explosive issue at a certain time, then it benefits whichever position has the greatest support. And in this case, it will help drive independent voters into our arms this fall. So first, I want to talk a little bit about gun safety, and then I'll stop for a minute. As you know, the beloved Mitch McConnell has named John Cornyn of Texas as his #1 person to supervise Republican participation in discussions about what will pass. Joe Biden did a speech last night that already signaled that he knows that Republicans are not going to pass an outright ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, which was law until 2004. Was passed in 1994 when we held majorities, and it went away in 2000. It was passed only with a sunset clause that would end it in 2004, and it ended in 2004 when we didn't have any control over Congress at all. So we just didn't have the votes. So Joe Biden signaled last night that he is going to hold out for an increase from 18 to 21 of people who can buy an AR-15. Now, that won't be a part of the compromise either. What it looks like is the compromise will include incentivizing the states to pass red flag laws, meaning ways that are consistent with due process, that you can take somebody's gun away if they exhibit certain behaviors. It's always an issue as to what the process has to be that denies somebody liberty or property without due process of law, but there are ways to do that. They will obviously do some things about put some money into school safety. They are going to do something to do with safe storage of guns in homes. I don't know what that will look like. And the best of the four things that they will do is strengthen universal background checks. You want to cover everything, and you want to have there be at least a small waiting period. You'd also like a better digitalization of federal records. I don't know if they'll do that. But just to get those four things requires 10 Republicans to basically walk the plank. That is, it's something they believe they want to vote for. They're under tremendous political pressure to vote to give the Schumer 10 votes, and they will do that. But as a commentator said the other day, you watch, those 10 votes will come from people who are certain they aren't going to run again, or like Susan Collins. Susan Collins is the exception. Her voters would want this. It'll come from people who aren't running again or who were just reelected, like Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. And that's how they'll get to 10. And then everybody else will give some lame reason why they're not for it, because they're scared of getting primaries from their right wing. And so that will set us up to have this be an issue again in November, because they'll do almost nothing on the prevalence of AR-15s, which are just set up to kill a large number of people in a short amount of time. And, you can talk all you want about all guns being like all other guns, but if you're in a mass shooting situation, having to stop and change magazines or reload is a wonderful thing for people who are being shot, because maybe not so much for fourth graders, but what you try to do if you're still alive, of course, is tackle the gunman while he's not killing you. Unfortunately, I've had a point in my life where somebody was attempting to do me ill with a shotgun, and I can tell you it's an experience. But I'm here to say that it matters whether somebody can fire 30 rounds in 10 seconds. Yeah. It just does. And they can talk about giving teachers pistols all they want, but the number one, if your killings are bad enough, but mass killings, a large number of people are made possible by something that our forefathers never intended in the Second Amendment, and that is that you could fire 100 shots in 30 seconds. Anyway, that's what's going to happen. There will be a bill. There's no chance, I think, no chance that the Republicans would risk having no bill at all. There's kind of a general person's agreement here. You see Chris Murphy of Connecticut not raking Republicans over the coals, even though Mitch McConnell says it's just a mental health issue. You see, until they pass something, you'll see very little criticism of Republicans. They'll wait to make it a campaign issue till after they get their compromise. And in the House, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats will end up having to agree with whatever the Republicans agreed to in the Senate. Questions, thoughts, or concerns about my predictions on gun safety? Agree with all that stuff? Shall we move on?
I was just horrified. That's all I could say is last week, and there's been shooting since then. And
well, the Tulsa, the guy had an AR-15 type rifle. He at least wasn't between the ages of 18 and 21. We had a run on that. What has now emerged in America is something that is incomprehensible, and we're so numb. It's just, and interesting thing politically, I know it seems a little weird to talk about it politically, but here goes. It's not going to stop. It divides us and will continue to divide us. What the Supreme Court should do, which they're not going to do, is define. They've already established, back when 20 years ago, we were saying the language of the Second Amendment was about a well-regulated militia, and then it never guaranteed personal ownership of weapons in houses. But the Supreme Court has ruled differently, and there is a protected Second Amendment right to having firearms. I think the Supreme Court could decide, they're not going to under this court, that there's no Second Amendment protected right to have an assault weapon, but they're not going to do that. So we have to get moving politically, and that actually relates to my next segment, which is about how we could get 4 or 5 more Democratic senators. Any comments on guns? Hey, Tom.
Again, unmute yourself.
You're muted, Tom.
I forgot. Okay. There was a nice, interesting article. I read the Yahoo News in the morning, and it was about Canada and how quickly they acted on the gun issue. But it went on to talk about the type of government that most of the European governments, or a lot of them, are parliamentary, as is Canada. And it pointed out that the way they have to form a government, you have to, you have a lot more cooperation. And talked about our system is almost designed at this point for failure because of the closeness of the races. If you're a Republican and a Democrat proposes something, you vote against it, and vice versa. And it also went on to say that whenever someone from America goes to South America or somewhere to propose a government, most of the time they propose parliamentary to these new systems, because most of the systems like ours end up in revolt. We've lasted far longer than was anticipated. Anyway, I thought it was pretty interesting.
I think so. I think it'd be good to remember what, if any, the advantages are of our system, and there are some. You remember the joke always was about the parliamentary system in Italy, which governments were turning over every year, and those are parliamentary systems which where you don't get enough members yourself, so you have to basically form coalition governments where minority caucuses join you to name the prime minister, and they're notorious for their vulnerability to public positions. So you get, that's a downside. We've had more stability, and at some points in our history, stability has been a good thing. Remember, there are also parliamentary systems that are so solid. I think Margaret Thatcher, in some of her times, didn't need anybody but her fellow Tories, and kneecapped her citizens on a daily basis. So absolutely, right now, if we had a parliamentary system, if we had a parliamentary system and Trump was the prime minister, he wouldn't have lasted close to 4 years, because they wouldn't have sustained the majority. Remember also that the problem is not just that. We used to have 80 swing seats, and there used to be more of a compulsion of members to move across the aisle on certain issues. And we're down to about 40 swing seats in the House. And the difference, Derek Kilmer talks about this, the difference is more House members who are Republicans who do not feel like they can vote for something that is bipartisan. Keep in mind, as I've said before, this is true of the major visible public issues, but there are a lot of there are a fair amount of bipartisan laws that get passed in Congress to this day. But on an issue like gun safety, some House Republicans would see signing on to a Pelosi compromise as political suicide, and there are more of them than there used to be.
Yeah.
Anything else on guns before we go to the Senate?
Sheila.
Well, I would like to make a comment if I could. Can
Where
you
is
hear
it?
me?
Yes.
This is Jackie Conus, and I'd like to make a comment about it. I've heard that now that states can enact more gun control laws, and I know that in the past, Washington has had some gun control laws that other people haven't, or that other states haven't, and I wonder what you think about that. If that will then force the federal to do more gun control.
Thanks, Jackie.
So it's the states don't have unimpeded ability to pass gun control laws, but how impeded they are is a matter that the Supremes are talking about right now. There's an obscure law that they're ruling on having to do with concealed weapons in New York, and it comes under the Common Commerce Clause, and so there is some protection of federal superiority through regulation of interstate commerce. So it's what states like California are doing right now could ultimately get blocked by the Roberts court, or at least the ones not named Roberts, the 5 other justices. But I think it's still an impressive path. It's just a little bit of an uneven path in terms of what state actions are precluded. But I think it's definitely something to do. And another something to do is there was a news note the other day about suing gun manufacturers. There is actually federal liability protection for gun manufacturers, but some limited ways around that. So we should be doing anything that we can do. And so you're right about that.
That's unbelievable.
Yes, well, I certainly agree too that in having gun owners or gun dealers and manufacturers insured makes a lot of sense. And I mean, if we could sue IKEA for furniture that topples over when a kid climbs on it, I don't understand why we can't sue a manufacturer of guns if a kid picks one up in the house. And, you know, I mean, they know how to make these guns safe. So I just think that suing is probably the best thing that we could do.
Well, I think that's right. Especially if there weren't an explicit federal statute that gives them that protection. The way around in Connecticut had to do with their use of an advertising campaign that somehow got around when they sued Remington, got around that. Let's go on.
Sheila had a question.
Yeah, I did. I was listening yesterday to the committee hearing from the House on gun safety, and it seemed to me a lot of it had to do with hardening the schools, or the area, or the hardening the atmosphere, or the locales. And I just wondered what you thought about that, David.
I think they're going to look at a number of things that don't piss off the NRA and the other, and that are much less significant than what they should be doing. That isn't to say that they shouldn't be doing them, because you could imagine if that school itself, when that teacher closed that door, if it had locked, maybe, you know, things could have turned out differently. So you don't want to say, you know, don't work on that, but there is a way it turns us away from the pestilence itself, which is the presence, I think, of guns in general, and particularly assault rifles in our culture. But I'd be for mental health coverage and all those things. I'm just not for Republicans getting to promise that it's a solution. So I want our second segment to quickly run over where we stand in expanding our 50 seats in the Senate. Remember, as we get critical of Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, that it's an extraordinarily wonderful thing to have them with us, to have 50. We only got to 50 because Trump screwed up Georgia in January, or we'd be at 48, and everything Biden would be trying to do would have to be approved by Mitch McConnell. Hence, we would not only like to stay at 50, we would like to increase from 50. 50 makes us less dependent on Manchin and Sinema, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to change the filibuster rule, but it makes that more scary to Republicans. So, for instance, you can say, if you had 54 senators, you can say, if you don't get serious about X, you know, we're going to institute a limited change in the 50-vote filibuster rule, which might have some impact. More importantly, it changes the 50 votes we need for reconciliation bills. We're going to have to redo the tax law in the next 2 years, and you only need 50 votes for that because it's part of budget reconciliation. And we'll be negotiating tax rates for the rich. And when Kristen Sinema is a known apologist for tax rates for the rich, So you want to have 51, 52, 53 senators so that those tax rates don't get decided by Kristen Sinema. So anyway, let me quickly run through 9 races of consequence. So first, as you know, we have to defend in Georgia, where Reverend Warnock is being opposed by a halfback, Herschel Walker. I think we'll be fine there. Herschel Walker is already, it's already being displayed that he has violence against women issues from the past, and that he doesn't have any idea what he's doing. So I think we'll be all right. There's a tight race in Nevada. I don't know. That's Ren Masto. I have no idea. Other than there's thin majorities and Latino populations are growing, and that's why we have a strategy of diverse voter registration, because an extra 200,000 registered Latino voters is nothing but a great idea. And there's some thought that maybe Mark Kelly's in trouble with Arizona. I don't think he is. I think he appeals to independent voters quite nicely. Nothing like being a former astronaut. And so this idea of getting up to 53 or 54 means we have to defend all 3 of those seats, and Jean Shaheen and New Hampshire, but we might well do that. It's certainly not out of the question. In terms of favorite races to look at, you're starting with Pennsylvania. And I'll say something at the end about what we can do all about this. Remember, Pennsylvania, until very recently, was a Democratic state and not a swing state. And we won that, Biden won by 160,000 votes. But the last time the governor ran, he won by 700,000 votes. And they've nominated a wacko as the Republican candidate for governor, which hurts their chances to win the Senate race. So that looks very good. That's John Fetterman, the 6'8" former mayor of Braddock, heavily tattooed. In a way, you might have rather have seen Connor Lamb win, but he wasn't going to. He's the moderate Democratic congressman. But at least Fetterman's got some juice. And the Republican candidate is quite likely to be Dr. Oz. And, Dr. Oz is disliked by a lot of Republicans. You can see Fetterman turning the center. And I hate to be it's not my problem, but he did serve in the Turkish army. So that's not a great campaign credential, let me tell you. He's got dual citizenship, which he totally deserves. But I'm just saying, if you were campaigning in Harrisburg, you wouldn't necessarily tout your Turkish army credentials. That's a good race for us. The second good race, surprisingly, is Ohio. So that's also an open seat where a moderate Republican in Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey, who's a legend moderate, is retiring. And in Ohio, Rob Portman is retiring. For all we're saying about that now being a Republican state, Cobain knows more about this than I do. Remember, the Republicans they have been electing are DeWine, Portman, Kasich. They're closer to the center. And J.D. Vance, who they just nominated, had to drink the Kool-Aid after once calling Trump an idiot. He now prostrates himself on the floor when Trump's in his vicinity. So I think there's a possibility that Tim Ryan, who's a blue-collar Democrat, will be able to get back some of the votes that Sherrod Brown, as the other senator, has already got. These are working class Democrats that were not attracted to Hillary, but might be attracted to Tim Ryan. And Cobain could say why I'm full of it, but I think there's some promise in Ohio. The third state where there's a lot of promise is North Carolina. They're the African-American former Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court, who's already been elected statewide in a tough year to run. Sherry Beasley is running against a Trumpite election denier, Ted Budd, who beat the former moderate Republican governor. So yet again, you get people in the center who would rather not have that Republican candidate, and you get a very good Democratic candidate who has not been wounded in the primary. So now we're thinking Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, all not bad and all somewhat resistant to national politics. The other three races I've underscored in order of possibility are first Wisconsin. That's where Ron Johnson is running. He promised not to run again. He's gone full-scale maniacal. He doesn't believe in climate change, COVID, gun safety. He doesn't believe in anything. He's a very sour man, and he's not polling well. Republicans are fighting over who, Democrats are fighting over who gets to run, the lieutenant governor or possibly the multimillionaire owner of the Milwaukee Bucks. And they're polling even there. So that's our fourth possibility. And we could win all four of those or not, which would take us to 54. There's two longer shots, one in Missouri where the Republicans may nominate the same man they threw out of the governorship 2 years ago, which would be wonderful. And then possibility in Florida. Well, Val Demings, the former police chief, African-American police chief of Orlando, is running against Marco Rubio. So that gives you 6. I can't think of anything else that's even a possibility for a take back. So if we could defend 3 and win like 4 of those 6, we'd be at 54, which would be nothing but a cool thing. And we could do that and lose the House at the same time, unfortunately. So in terms of what to do, if you're not going to sign up to go someplace and campaign, then there are postcard projects in all of these states. And I think it's proven that postcards are one meaningful tool in a strategy. With regard to giving money, I don't usually give money to individual Senate candidates because they raise so much. I give money to organizers in those states who are trying to register voters and get them to the polls. In my blog that went out yesterday, I noted 4 of those organizations, or you can email me and I'll email them to you. Their recommendations from Common Power, which I mentioned to you before, which is a great organizing organization that identifies partners in these states. So to the extent Cindy and I have money to give, we give to that kind of organization, or to Mi Familia Vota, which is a national, which works in 10 or so states, and which has registered hundreds of thousands of Latinos. So that's my little unit on those races, and I'm open to your questions, thoughts, concerns, or in the case of Mr. Kilbane, insights and insults.
Thing I would ask you to send out the addresses of those people that you're recommending, because I don't like to give them my credit card, and I imagine other people feel the same way. So if you could give an address,
I could do that.
Contact them, either way.
The links are in yesterday's blog, which you get, but I will personally send you the actual addresses, and a lot of us are getting kind of, a lot of these organizations go through ActBlue, as you know. So you go through the same donate structure over and over again.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with sending somebody a check.
Yeah, I got another comment on Ohio. I think I just saw it yesterday where Ford Motor announced that they're going to produce the electric cars in Sheffield, the plant in Sheffield, which they had and closed down, years ago, more than 20 years ago. But that's a big deal for labor. And as an aside, that's in Lorain County. That's where I started my Democratic crusade in politics. I became a precinct committeeman there. Anyway,
You could go back and get elected there with the electric car. It's amazing. Ford is banking on right now a hybrid battery for a fully electric car costs $18,000. And Ford is banking on that going way down over time, and fully electric vehicles being very competitive. It's a huge bet that Ford is making, and I think it's a wise one, given that our carbon issue is not going to go away. But I think that place, sure, J.D. Vance can visit Lorain County all he wants, but Tim Ryan is going to out-credential him every day of the week on these matters. I think Trump is a special deal. We've had that problem before where blue-collar Democrats can't imagine our candidate in their backyard. Al Gore, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, not a barbecue goer among them. You couldn't necessarily think, unless there was pate at the barbecue. And so Tim Ryan's not like that. I think that's a good shot for us, and he's worked hard for it.
we would have pig roast for his money.
I'm just, I shouldn't be disparaging perfectly good candidates. I've met John Kerry. He's a smart guy and a great guy. I'm just saying he communicated a little social distance even before.
Just a touch. Val Deming is the one you mentioned down in Florida.
Yes.
And she's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. From my contacts in Florida anyway, she looks like she might be doing pretty well. The other person is, I have a county clerk person who is my contact in Wisconsin. And he says that, whatchamacallit, I won't even mention his name, the Republican in Wisconsin is probably going to do pretty well, despite all.
Why? I don't know why he would feel that way. They're polling even. Ron Johnson's got huge negatives. That doesn't mean he can't win. I'm just saying. If you look at Cook Report and so forth, we're sure it's probably rated a lead Republican, but we have the governorship, and the other Senate seat is Tammy Baldwin, Democrat. So it's not like we can't win in Wisconsin. We can win. Biden just won in Wisconsin. So
they like Trump up there. That's why
but Sheila, we beat Trump in Wisconsin.
I understand that. I'm just talking from my friend who is a Democrat and holds concept of what's going on. So
in the olden days, you remember this well, it used to be Gaylord Nelson at Broxmire. So it's another state where the senators used to be the Democrats or moderate to liberal Republicans, Charlie Percy in Illinois and Bob Griffin in Michigan and so forth. And it's changed a lot. And what has changed is working men, blue-collar men and women voting against their personal interests and buying this crap that that Trump and others have put out, that they care about working people. And the way you can respond to that, of course, is who will you run in opposition? And that's, of course, the Tim Ryan argument and the Fetterman argument. He's not, I mean, these folks come across as very accessible. I would not, all I can say is every recent election they've had in Wisconsin that we've won, and that's a good sign. Doesn't mean we're going to beat Ron Johnson. It means we have a shot. Remember, in all these cases, that Donald Trump is campaigning for us. The other day, he said there's something fishy about Brian Kemp beating David Perdue in Georgia by 50%. He's basically saying that the Georgia election results were fraudulent. And the more he does stuff like that, the better off we are. He's a real help. He helps support candidates that are more beatable, and he says things that continue. The dilemma that we talked about 2 years ago when Biden won is the very strategy that Trump has to employ to raise money and solidify his base is exactly the same strategy that is antipathy to independent voters. That's it in a nutshell. You can get 40% all you want, but to get to 50%, you have to figure out a way to get that extra 10% without jettisoning your 40%, or you have to figure out how to expand your base. And his base has been declining since 2016. So that's good.
What do you say about Texas?
There's a poll today that says Beto's running even, but I haven't looked at whose poll that is.
I like that.
I mean, the one thing you could say for Beto is that's just another state where there's ultimately a demographic destiny, and with each election, the share of the overall vote that's cast by white males is a smaller percentage of the total, and that helps Beto. But whether that's another 48% race, I don't know. It's certainly worth watching, as is Stacey Abrams versus Kemp. The bad news about Kemp beating Purdue about that by that much is you really would have wanted it to be closer to Goose Stacey Abrams. I want to say before we close a bit about the lawsuits. Any other questions before I do? So as you know, some of us are hoping that Merrick Garland will indict the president, the former president, and he might. I was looking for the wording and I'm not finding it. He had the claim, maybe I got it here in my notes, but oh yeah, here it is. If Merrick Garland was to indict Trump, yeah, the charges would be obstructing an official proceeding or conspiracy to defraud the United States. I think it's likely that Trump will be indicted. I think the January 6th committee, having 5 public hearings in the next 2 months, will lay out the case. There's been plenty of meetings between the Justice Department and the committee's investigators. And I think slowly but surely they're building a case that Trump was deeply involved in the planning for January 6th, including the selection in the states of fraudulent electors, which is made up electors, which is a no-no. And so I think Merrick Garland is sitting there thinking, are you ever going to indict a president of the United States? It's not something you want to have happen. I think the answer on balance will be yes. We'll find out. Meanwhile, emerging in Georgia is the much more sexy issue, because everyone who follows these things knows that Trump called Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in January and asked him to find 11,702 more votes. So it's not hard to claim that that's an attempt to violate election law. And it's lesser known that Lindsey Graham called Raffensperger on the same subject in December. So what Fani Willis did, who's the Fulton County prosecutor, is she went to the Supreme Court judge and said she needed a grand jury. What that grand jury is an investigative grand jury. All they do, there's 26 of them, 23 and 3 alternates. And all they do is meet weekly, issue subpoenas, and hear and investigate what the person who received the subpoena says. They subpoenaed Brad Raffensperger himself, and he'll get to say what he felt Trump was saying to him. And what they do at the end is they go back to the court and to the district attorney, they're impaneled for the specific purpose of recommending whether criminal charges should be charged, which charges, and to whom. Their subpoena power is not going to be overturned by anyone. They're not going to subpoena Trump, but they're not going to, no one's going to be able to say, I'm protected, I don't have to answer those questions without getting, the Superior Court would find them in contempt of the court for not honoring the subpoena. This is juicy stuff because it's pretty much out there that Trump basically was asking the Secretary of State to overturn the certified election results. So that's good. Watch that. Those are the two things we have going. This civil case that Letitia James has in New York is out there, and something might happen, but it's not nearly as pregnant as these two cases that I've talked to you about. Questions, thoughts, and concerns about these matters? You knew all that stuff even before I said it, right?
Yes, but it has been frustrating. I sometimes, Merrick Garland, I wish he was a spiteful person for what Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump did to him, but he's not.
Well, I mean, it's very much in his interest to act publicly exactly. If Merrick Garland files charges, eventually the Supreme Court has to say, will have something to say. And how Merrick Garland comports himself at all stages is key in him being found to have addressed his obligations appropriately. So there is all sorts of progressive Democrats who want a little red meat every week from Merrick Garland.
Absolutely.
And he's, even if he hates Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump more than anyone in the world, he would not tell you that. He probably wouldn't even say it to his sweetie for fear that someone else might overhear.
But every one of those justices sitting there knows that he was robbed.
Well, I think they were, they do feel that way.
They know it.
Mitch McConnell set up a new rule. I have to say that a dearly beloved Ruth Bader Ginsburg did us in as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she was thinking the same thing that the rest of us were thinking when Barack Obama went to her in 2015 and said it was going to be a good time to give way. She thought there was no chance that Donald Trump would win. And last I checked, I didn't think there was a chance Trump could win either. So she wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And he didn't win. So
no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Christina, hi.
Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Well, good. It's beautiful sunshine out here. It's probably raining out there.
Oh, no, it's like humid and hot. We're having problems. I'm dying here. I'm not used to this.
No, come on back. You're welcome here.
I never pass up a chance to try to give kudos to the DOJ and Merrick Garland. I know that progressives want blood. He's doing a fantastic job. 2 days ago, maybe yesterday, they're seeking 280 more indictments against people that were at the Capitol on January 6th. And this is in addition to the well over 80 convictions that we have gotten. They're taking out the low fruit. They're building the case. He is doing a great job, and he is following the rule of law to do it. And he needs to be applauded for that. We want rule of law to stand.
That's right.
Agreed.
Right. And it is, back to Bonnie Willis in Georgia. It would be, if it doesn't happen, it'd be consolation that we would have the criminal charges in Georgia. But I think actually it will happen because there's a danger to democracy. Once you're convinced that your person to be charged is guilty and your attorney general, I think you have an obligation to file the charges. We'll see. But I agree with Christina. I agree that he's doing everything right.
Yeah.
So,
Cynthia.
She gave up on us.
Are you unmuted? Oh, unmute yourself, Cynthia.
Oh, there she is.
So, that's
There we
our,
go.
she's there.
Mhm.
Oh, there she is. Can you, we can't hear your voice,
I can't hear you. Oh,
although you're on mute, doesn't show.
no. Must be something wrong with your sound. You might want to put it in the chat, Cynthia.
You want to, before we close?
I can hear her just fine.
Oh,
You-
okay.
No, not right now because you're muted now, Cynthia. Try, there you go. Oh, now you're off again.
So some of Cynthia's political opponents at Bainbridge have been waiting for this moment.
Something's happening.
We're after you, Cynthia.
If you can put it in chat, we'll
Yeah,
respond.
put it
to
in chat. Type it in chat. Yeah. Anybody else have a question while Cynthia's typing?
And then, well, after we respond, we'll let you go. We're almost out of our,
I know. Wow. You know, it always goes so fast when we're with you, David.
it does. What a good time we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope you'll be back with us next month also.
I'll be here every time you ask me, so.
Oh, we really appreciate it. Like
You
I
don't
said,
have a
you always
chance.
talk.
You don't have a choice. You have to be back next month
Well,
or whenever.
okay, I don't think she's saying anything. Oh,
Oh,
it
here
is.
we go. We have
Just
something.
confused about the consequences of the parties who were subpoenaed, i.e. Kevin McCarthy, where the January committee is concerned, like they don't give a, you know what. So that's contempt of Congress. And Karen was mentioning, just as we go on, that Peter Navarro is being indicted today as we speak on contempt of Congress for refusing to appear before the January 6th committee. When you have a subpoena that is ignored, Congress can find you in contempt by majority vote, which takes virtually all of Nancy Pelosi's crew. And the only Republicans who would dare vote for that are Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. So then they get the majority of vote and the Congress finds them in contempt and it's enforceable. And then what the subpoenaed person would do would be appeal that contempt within a court of law, and the court's got to uphold it. And their only reason to appealing it would be some claim that McCarthy has made that the January 6th committee is illegitimate and therefore could not find people in contempt because they don't have the legitimacy to do that, which congressional committees can do. So that's what that's all about in a court. And a court has to affirm that. The only possible claim that would get you out of that, they're not going to find, a court's not going to find that that committee is illegitimate. The only thing they could find is some kind of claim of executive privilege. But you notice Ivanka and Jared and any number of other people have already appeared before that committee, Donald Jr. Mark Meadows has done interviews. So I don't know how, it's a resolute smaller group, including Navarro, that have refused, and I don't know how he can possibly sustain that.
All right. Christina said that Navarro's already been taken into custody. And you're right. I think he probably is a flight risk.
I don't think that would hold him. You can check the news, but I mean, a judge could keep you there till you answered your questions, but I think there's probably some claim he'll make of illegitimacy that would get him out temporarily.
And that's what makes U.S. citizens angry, when we see people like this just spitting in the face of a law and they're getting away with it.
Well, I mean, we want our enemies to be able to use the judicial system as well. But we would like the judicial system to remind them of the law. And the nice thing about the January 6th committee is that they have been able to assemble the evidence we need them to assemble. So that's, I think those of you who are TV watchers will enjoy those public hearings.
June 9th is the date that's supposed to be the initial public.
And the nice thing about it is, when you're watching things like Supreme Court reviews and so forth, you have to listen to Jim Jordan mouth off forever.
Oh,
In this case, it's just the Democrats and Kinzinger and Cheney. So there's nobody that is going to do the Ted Cruz performative thing and then check and see how many tweets he's got.
Yeah.
that was what was driving me nuts yesterday with Jordan. Oh, God.
So these 5 hearings will be different because Pelosi refused to name Jordan and other people to the committee.
Books.
Right. That's good. So.
Well, okay. Well, we'll see you folks in another month. It's been a pleasure.